It's 6 o'clock in London, it's 1 p.m. in New York, 1 a.m. in Hong Kong, 3 a.m. in Sydney, 10 a.m. in San Francisco, and 10:30 at night in Mumbai. Greetings, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on where in the world you are. My name is Patrick L. Young, the IPO-VID Livestream, Series 10, Episode 3. That's Episode 57, starts here. So an exciting week in the Rock of Gibraltar this week on the territory with some degree of vested interest because we at Valerium exercised the option to move to 90% of the Gibraltar Stock Exchange. That transaction, of course, pending regulatory approval from the good folks of the Gibraltar Financial Services Commission. Those are exciting times, and at the same time, it's exciting times for sport trade in Indiana. They're trying to make a stock exchange for stocks in the United States of America, land of the orange jumpsuit for many who've tried previously. Of course, things are liberalizing there gradually. Looks as if the laws will be in place for them to be able to launch in at least Indiana during the course of next year. Finally, a long-held saga in the parish. S&P Global and IHS Markit are one. They have completed their merger. We're delighted to see an information behemoth in this, the age of mega data. And of course, ladies and gentlemen, how could I possibly introduce today's show without mentioning the fact that we are going live on International Women's Day. Happy International Women's Day to everybody, male and female out there in the audience. We want to say huge words of congratulations to the many fabulous women of the parish of bourses and exchanges and markets in which we operate. Of course, none more so than Adina Friedman of NASDAQ and the president of the New York Stock Exchange, Lynn Martin. What has Lynn Martin got in common with the following list? They're all former alumni of the IPO-VID show. To wit, thank you all those ladies who have been so illuminating on the IPO-VID show. Lynn Martin of the NYSE, Sharon Constantian of Genius Boards. Hope your evening is going well for the International Women's Day. I know you're having an event in London, Sharon. Mudwina Rees-Mogg of Funding Index, the Global Blockchain Business Council's dynamic Sandra Rowe, Shari Noonan of Rialto Markets, Ivana Gazic of the Zagreb Stock Exchange, Rosa Armesto of the Federation of European Securities Exchanges, Vermiculus Technologies CEO Tarana Deriati, Streets Consulting's Julia Streets, Eliza Philby, who was, of course, illuminating us on the show with Julia just a few weeks ago. And most recently, we had our fabulously dynamic latest guest from NASDAQ, Erja Retson. Happy International Women's Day to you all. And let us also say, thank you very much and a huge happy International Women's Day to Fibery and the team there, and particularly Paulina Zenovich, for introducing us not merely to an incredible level of dopamine, which we didn't think was possible in a human being, but also the wonders of low-code, no-code tools that continue to bring our teams together around the world. And with that, our production team are going to say, it's time for me to say, all this and more has been already covered in greater detail in Exchange Invest Daily, the unique newsletter of the Bourse business. Send us an email or hit me up wherever you're watching this, whichever social media stream you're on, Patrick L. Young, and we can get you signed up for a free 30-day trial to better understand the Bourse business. In the meantime, if you're liking this show, don't forget, give us a little bit of love. That's a K-pop love sign, allegedly just being done very badly by a middle-aged male. Our guest today is Nigel Feetham. He's FinTech's renaissance man, in my opinion. He's a QC, that's a Queen's Counsel. That's the ultimate level of courtroom barrister in the British legal system. He's the head of financial services and a senior partner of the leading Gibraltar law firm, Hassans. He served on the decision-making committee. That's an independent statutory committee of the Gibraltar Financial Services Commission, the regulator in the British Overseas Territory there, as well as having been a non-executive member of the board of the GFSC itself. Nigel has been actively involved in various strands of FinTech and is a leading expert on protected cell company structures and more broadly the insurance sector. Nigel has also published several law books and was formerly a visiting professor of law at a UK university. And I commend you to follow him on LinkedIn, where he has many exciting and interesting interventions on the world of FinTech, on what's happening in Gibraltar, and much, much more from an acute legal perspective. So, Nigel, good evening. Tell us, I think my masculine intuition may be able to guess, but where in the world are you today?
Good evening, Patrick. I am in my offices in Gibraltar. As you can see, on my left is a lighthouse that stands out as a beacon of hope. To my right, you might not be able to see it, but this is the Rock of Gibraltar that symbolizes strength and resilience, both very befitting in the troubled times in which we live.
Well, Nigel, with an opener like that, I mean, the Rock of Gibraltar itself, it's had quite an incredible military history and dynamic history over time. But more recently, it's become, well, better known as becoming a financial center and blockchain hub. Tell us a little bit about how you got involved.
I got involved in Gibraltar 30 years ago when I qualified as a barrister in the United Kingdom. I've been practicing law for 30 years as a regulatory lawyer. My involvement in the financial services space happened very early in my career. I was involved back in 1995, 1996 in advising the Gibraltar Financial Services Commission on the practical implementation of the European passport back then. If you remember, clearly, those of us that go back, our memory goes back a very, very long time. Gibraltar was able to put in place the regulatory regime in Gibraltar that matched UK standards in order to allow the UK government to give Gibraltar market access, not just in the UK, but also across the European Union, and the rights known as passporting rights, which clearly no longer apply given Brexit earlier in the year.
Indeed. We'll get on to that thorny topic of Brexit in just a moment, Nigel. First of all, let me say thank you so far for all of the comments. Early doors this evening. I want to say hello to Ian Bonsor, Les Calvert. Good to see you guys. Good to see John T. Good to see Marcus Ward as well. And most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, a special digital visual world exclusive this evening. Peter Secon has joined us. He says, evening all, Nigel. I love the recent article on the rock-solid digital revolution. Well, let's say something back to Peter this evening. It's something I don't even know that Nigel will be aware of so far. We want to congratulate Peter Secon. He's the administrator of the independent Telegram group of Valerian Blockchain, or Valerian PLC as we're now called. Ari Thomas Secon was born today at 12:17, just after midday. He weighed 7 pounds 4 ounces, and we're delighted to therefore welcome our youngest ever viewer to this show. Hello, Ari. It's great to see you, and congratulations, Dad, Peter, and Mum. Welcome. We're delighted to see another person being added to the Valerian tribe, even though we expect it will be a few months before we get his first message on the independent Telegram group. Now, with that, thank you very much for your early comments. Nigel, talk to me. You mentioned passporting just a moment ago. So, I mean, actually, that's an interesting pointer, because obviously there's been a huge upheaval in the financial centre in Gibraltar in recent times, driven by Brexit. And not a lot of people may know this, but I mean, it was almost North Korean, the vote for Brexit. I mean, you actually voted, what, in Gibraltar, something like 97% in favour of remaining part of the European Union, as I recall?
That is absolutely correct, Patrick. And if we perhaps take a step back and give a little bit of background, what is it that we mean by passporting? By passporting, what we mean is that when Gibraltar and the UK were part of the European Union, what it meant was that under the financial services legislation that then applied, any financial services company that acquired a license in a member state was able to passport its services, in other words, to have market access to the rest of the European Union. This was extremely important for Gibraltar, and we built our business model, our economic business model, around passporting arrangements, as I said, back in 1996-97, when the UK confirmed Gibraltar's ability to be able to passport across the EU and indeed into the United Kingdom. I remember it was a Conservative government at the time, and the Chancellor of the Exchequer was able to confirm that Gibraltar matched all the required standards of regulation. This resulted in us being able to grow a significant industry in Gibraltar, both in banking and also in insurance. Insurance has been a huge sector for the local economy. It developed around the year 2001, when we saw the first Gibraltar insurance company setting up in the jurisdiction. That was Marcus Study. It's a matter of public record that the first company to be licensed as an insurance company were the Marcus Study group of companies. This was followed in 2002 by Admiral establishing an underwriting subsidiary in Gibraltar, Admiral being one of the leading personal lines insurers in the United Kingdom. In 2004-3, we saw Advantage being set up, followed by Saga in 2004. We've seen very many insurance companies being set up since then. The common focus for the majority of these entities was the UK market. So in other words, insurance companies being set up in the jurisdiction in order to be able to sell their products in the United Kingdom. What we saw and where Gibraltar did very well was in the area of startup companies. In other words, companies that at the time were known as virtual insurers. They were brokers that undertook the entire insurance process, were involved in the entire insurance process, except taking the underwriting risks. So therefore, establishing their own underwriter, their own insurance company, became a logical next step. Brexit caused a huge disruption to the Gibraltar market. So clearly, overnight, Gibraltar found its economic model under threat. This therefore required the government of Gibraltar to quickly mobilize itself in order to take action to safeguard the Gibraltar economy, which they've been able to do, in my opinion, very successfully. And they've done that by negotiating continued market access to the United Kingdom for Gibraltar Financial Services companies. Gibraltar is the only overseas territory, the only territory outside the United Kingdom where a financial services entity, which is licensed by the Gibraltar regulator, is able to obtain access to the broad range of financial services markets in the United Kingdom. The problem, of course, was that a number of Gibraltar companies were also operating their European passport across other European Union member states. And Brexit meant that upon the United Kingdom exiting the European Union, and Gibraltar clearly was a member state of the European Union by virtue of UK membership, so therefore we were effectively forced out of the European Union. On Brexit, what this meant was those companies that were selling their products in the European Union were not able to continue to do so. This presented a significant challenge for very many insurance companies, and I spent 3 years of my working life effectively trying to mitigate the damage and harm to the Gibraltar sector, which I believe I did very successfully with the support of my colleagues, and I'm very happy to perhaps explain exactly what this meant in terms of the options that were available to those companies. Another point that I should make as well, Patrick, is that Gibraltar has a very important gaming industry. Gaming, as you know, within the European Union context is not passportable. In other words, the European Union has not harmonized gaming, but despite the fact that there has been no harmonization of gaming in the EU, Gibraltar became an important gaming industry as far back as 1992, when the government of Gibraltar back then licensed the first gaming operator, that happened to be Ladbrokes, back in 92, 93. We then saw Victor Chandler establishing his entire international betting business out of Gibraltar in the mid-1990s, and this was the catalyst for the growth of an industry that today accounts for roughly 3,400 jobs and is entirely digital. I think your Peter previously referred to an article that I published, and I invite viewers to read that article. What I attempted to do in that article was to compartmentalize, if you like, to describe the transformation of the Gibraltar economy from its origins in the areas of gaming, insurance, more recently banking, and also DLT, to that transformation into digital technology, which I believe makes Gibraltar not just a financial services sector, but I like to describe Gibraltar as a Gibraltar digital hub, because the large majority of business that is today done out of Gibraltar in the financial services sector, and I include gaming in that, is entirely digital.
So that's fascinating. So, I mean, you're talking so hard about the digital business. It's very interesting to see how much has been going on in the high street. Let me say, ladies and gentlemen, I'm terribly sorry if you're trying to watch this on LinkedIn. We are aware that there is a fault between the API on LinkedIn. We are currently absolutely live and functioning 100% on YouTube and Facebook. I am sorry, I do not know why we cannot seem to make LinkedIn actually connect. It started the broadcast but has then broken. It seems to be a LinkedIn problem. Sorry about that, particularly as we've got a spectacularly large audience this evening for Nigel, which is absolutely wonderful. Now, when we look at that whole thing, obviously, and we're going to jump a little, but we've got a couple of questions here which are really, really important. Peter Secon, good evening, Dad. He's set down his cigar and his cognac to be with us this evening and ask us a question. Actually, he's asking us a few questions, but he's jumped straight forward to crypto and blockchain in terms of your history. You're talking about the innovation of insurance, the innovation of gaming. So Peter asks, what lessons have Gibraltar learned from other countries, jurisdictions, mistakes to ensure that Gibraltar can become a global hub for all things crypto and blockchain?
That's a very good question, Peter, and I'm grateful for you to asking the question. I must say, I think Gibraltar has very few lessons to learn from other jurisdictions, because we were the first jurisdiction to actually regulate the blockchain space. In other words, 4 years ago, the government of Gibraltar, working very closely with the Gibraltar regulator, the Gibraltar Financial Services Commission, and the local industry, established a regulatory framework for the regulation of DLT and crypto in Gibraltar. We've done that, I believe, very, very successfully, and we've created a regulatory model that actually others have emulated. And I think other jurisdictions are moving towards the Gibraltar regulatory environment. My view is that regulation of this space is entirely necessary. I'm a strong advocate of regulation. I believe that financial services and technology fits in very well within the regulatory sector. I believe that provides the appropriate consumer confidence to allow the sector to grow. And certainly what we have seen is people coming to us in Gibraltar to say, you've done a very good job in the DLT space, and other jurisdictions are taking note of what you've done and also moving towards regulation. I mean, I don't know whether that answers your question or it doesn't, Peter, but the reality is that I think we were one of the first jurisdictions to regulate this space. So if anything, others are learning from us rather than us learning from other jurisdictions. We also find, Peter, this is interesting, perhaps market intelligence. I mean, I've spent a lot of my time over the last 3 months, 4 months, fielding inquiries from around the world. In other words, DLT providers that are either regulated or not regulated within this space, that are saying that they believe that they need to have regulation, that they need licensing, that they need a credible regulatory system that attaches to the activities that they undertake. And we have certainly fielded very many inquiries, and some of these have translated into real applications to the Financial Services Commission. There are currently 15 DLT providers that are licensed in Gibraltar. The most recent applications that were granted to Bullish, Bitso, Huboy. We also have Sonda and other very big and well-known international operators established and licensed here. I believe that by the end of the year, we will have at least another 6 licenses granted by the regulator. So it's all extremely exciting.
So that's extremely exciting. So actually, I'm going to jump to a follow-up question from Peter Secon right now, which is, therefore, what is the key for these exchanges and other blockchain entities in Gibraltar to ensure future survival and not fall foul of fines and thus, impair their growth in other jurisdictions? How do they ensure that growth in other jurisdictions?
I think the first thing that I think exchanges need to be very conscious of is the fact that all jurisdictions, I think, that the direction of travel is regulation. That regulation will be a key component of this space in the very near future. And we've seen jurisdictions already say that they will regulate the space. Of course, different jurisdictions will regulate in different ways. So, you can, for example, introduce restrictions on marketing or regulate marketing. You can do what we've done in Gibraltar, which is establish a bespoke regulatory regime for DLT specifically and crypto, which we believe is a very successful model and that has allowed Gibraltar to be as successful as we have been over the last few years. Or alternatively, jurisdictions might decide to include the DLT and crypto activity within the activities that they currently regulate within their own financial services regime. That makes it more restrictive. That makes it more restrictive, perhaps, for others to operate within that space. In Gibraltar, what we've done is we've introduced principles-based regulation. I'm a great fan of principles-based regulation because it allows the regulator to sit down with operators and licensees in a manner which is conducive towards meeting the right outcomes. An outcome which is good for consumers and at the same time allows operators and licensees to grow their business in a commercial environment. But of course, when we set up a licensee in Gibraltar, we obviously advise that they need to be cognizant of what the requirements are for them to be able to offer any services that they offer in other jurisdictions. This is not just a case of being licensed in Gibraltar or in any other regulated jurisdiction. It's a case of operators understanding the markets that they operate, and different markets have different rules.
Fascinating altogether. And then that leads us, actually, we've got a fast and furious series of questions at the moment. And thank you very much, Peter. And thank you very much also, John T, for those.
You're muted, Patrick.
I'm muted. I'm terribly sorry. I don't know how that happened. Let me ask a further question that's just come in from Bonsor. Thank you, John T, for your questions. Thank you, Peter Secon. How far ahead is Gibraltar in its regulatory framework of crypto compared to the rest of the world?
I think Gibraltar is miles ahead from the large majority of jurisdictions, because the very large majority of jurisdictions don't regulate the space. In other words, they haven't even come to terms with how they will regulate crypto and DLT. Whereas we went through the exercise of sitting down, and I'm referring specifically of the government of Gibraltar, the industry, the professionals that are based in Gibraltar, and indeed the regulator. We sat down and we devised a regulatory framework which clearly is one that we believe that other jurisdictions will emulate, and therefore, we are miles ahead, I think, in this space from anyone else, short of perhaps a number of other jurisdictions that have also introduced legislation and licensing regimes. But we have been extremely selective in who we license. We do not believe that Gibraltar is a jurisdiction that should open its doors to hundreds of operators. We are selective in who we bring. It's a model that we have adopted very successfully in the gaming sector and indeed also in insurance. And therefore, Gibraltar will become a leading international digital hub because of that combination of good regulation, good regulator, and very good operating companies with a good track record and very good systems and marketing which they operate. They are experts in what they do, and we welcome them in Gibraltar.
That's fascinating, incredible, fast and furious. Thank you for your questions. If I missed anything out, please let me know. Shout and holler, guys. If you'd like to add a follow-up to Nigel, if you'd like to like this bulletin, then please do so according to the appropriate social media buttons that are in front of you. We'd love to hear from you if you've got any further questions. Now, there are a couple of things that actually sprang to mind here, Nigel, quite fascinating. One of them was, you were obviously talking about the way that Gibraltar is the only British overseas territory that has direct transporting into the United Kingdom. You explained to us how that works. Let's take a step back, particularly for some of our American viewers. Define the British overseas territories. I'm not going to ask you to name all of them, but just so that people can understand.
I can't hear that, Patrick. Apologies.
Sorry, I'm not quite sure if you can hear me properly. I was just asking if you can just quickly define the British overseas territories, because you mentioned Gibraltar's unique position with the British overseas territories.
Yes, Gibraltar. Yes, I'll give you a brief outline of Gibraltar's constitutional relationship with the United Kingdom. So Gibraltar is an overseas territory of the United Kingdom. We have our own parliament in Gibraltar that is responsible for all domestic matters. We have therefore an ability to pass local laws and legislation, which we can do very quickly. And that, again, is one of the reasons why Gibraltar has been extremely successful in doing what we've done in the digital and financial services space. Because if we conceive of an idea, then from conception to implementation, we can have extremely quickly with a proactive government that is willing to bring legislation before Parliament. We also have in Gibraltar a system of law which is based on the English system of law. We apply common law. Common law, as you know, Patrick, is both flexible and predictable and based on precedent, and it's perceived as being a very fair system of law. We have our own courts in Gibraltar, the Supreme Court, the Court of Appeal, but the ultimate Court of Appeal in Gibraltar is the Privy Council in London, which is comprised of very senior judges in the United Kingdom. The United Kingdom is responsible for Gibraltar's foreign affairs. And given that the UK is responsible for Gibraltar's foreign affairs, we joined the European Union back in 1973, along with the UK, where Gibraltar was the member state, given that joining the European Union was an act of foreign affairs. And we were consulted by the United Kingdom back then, and we decided that our future lay with Europe, and we joined. And given that Gibraltar affairs are on the foreign affairs front a matter of responsibility for the United Kingdom, we joined with them. And unfortunately, we were then obliged to exit the European Union when the United Kingdom decided to exit under Brexit. On mute. You're on mute, Patrick.
I'm having all manner of problems here. Something has broken on my audio. I hope you can hear me. Interesting, very, very interesting. So uniquely, Gibraltar has this status with British Overseas Territories, which I think is quite fascinating. Good grief, we've got a very interesting intervention here I see coming from Peter Secon. Good grief. Well, there you go. I'm going to read that very slowly. Nigel, in an article anterior, de que Gibraltar puede ser para Sudamérica lo que Singapur es para Asia o Hong Kong para China continental. ¿Cómo hace Gibraltar para que esto suceda?
Okay, that's a very good attempt, Patrick. Let me just read it. It's in Spanish.
Try and read it properly. Yes, my Spanish is terrible.
Yes, en un artículo anterior hablas que Gibraltar puede ser para Sudamérica lo que Singapur es para Asia o Hong Kong para China continental. Just to translate that, I think what he's saying is in an article that you published, and I published a lot of articles, and I invite viewers to please follow me on LinkedIn or on Twitter. I've said in an article that Gibraltar can be for South America what Singapore is for Asia or Hong Kong is for China. And then he asked the question in Spanish, ¿Cómo hace Gibraltar para que esto suceda? How does Gibraltar do this? Well, I think the answer to the question is that Gibraltar can become the bridge into South America. And the reason why Gibraltar can become the bridge into South America in the DLT and crypto space is, an obvious one. Gibraltar is situated in the southern tip of Spain, geographically situated in the southern tip of Spain. Gibraltar is British, and we pride ourselves on our British sovereignty, but clearly we speak Spanish, as indeed we also speak English, and therefore that ability to speak Spanish and that ability to understand the Hispanic culture, in my view, allows Gibraltar and puts Gibraltar in a position where it could have a unique position to become a bridge between the wider crypto market and South America. We have a number of exchanges in Gibraltar that operate in the South American market. The best known, I think, local exchange is Bitso, and therefore, in answer to your question, I'm hugely excited about the possibility of Gibraltar growing that share in that sector, and I believe it can do so very, very successfully. Also to point out that clearly Gibraltar has an abundance of a Spanish-speaking workforce. If not Gibraltar-based, then persons that are resident in Spain and therefore able to cross the frontier on a daily basis, commute as a frontier worker in order to be able to work in Gibraltar. So should the South American market grow significantly for Gibraltar, we will be in a position where there will be an abundance of labor to be able to service that market very well indeed.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Nigel. And thank you for showing off your wondrous Spanish new dad, Peter Secon, this evening. That's really, really good. I think I'm going to have to disallow Ian Bonsor's question. Just not going to be able to go there. I'm afraid that sounds as if it's far too close to a leading question in relation to Valeria Main. Sorry about that. Going to rule that out. However, while we deal with a few microphone problems, and also sorry about that issue that we have been having on LinkedIn, we are looking at a very interesting question coming now from John T. And John T asks, following on from Peter's original question, what main blockers still exist for Gibraltar and FinTech and cryptocurrency and blockchain?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
So I think he's asking in terms of, are there any issues holding back the future development or the current development of blockchain, cryptocurrency and FinTech companies? Are there any issues that have been apparent to you that need to be perhaps improved, Nigel?
No. There's nothing that comes immediately to mind. What I can say is actually this. I mean, I've spent a lot of time with colleagues within my department, reaching out to the wider blockchain and crypto community over the last 3 or 4 months. And one of the trends that we're seeing, is exchanges and operators that are licensed in other jurisdictions seeking to also be licensed in Gibraltar. In other words, the trend towards multiple licenses in multiple jurisdictions. And this is something that we're seeing both from Asian interested parties and indeed from other geographical areas across the world. So that seems to suggest that actually they view the Gibraltar product very favorably, and indeed that they see the Gibraltar regulatory regime as one where they feel they need to be in.
Okay, that's really interesting. Now, let me ask you therefore a capacity question, because we've seen this with other regulators. Has the GFSC been able to keep up with the processing of so many applications? Because it sounds like there's a huge number of businesses trying to do blockchain business in Gibraltar.
Yes, they have, Patrick, and it's not easy for a regulator to service the needs of the industry when you have a highly competitive labour market, because clearly if the labour rates in the industry are significantly higher than the labour rates that the regulator can offer, then you will find that experienced individuals that previously used to work in the regulator will go and work in the private sector. So the regulator has a very difficult task, undoubtedly, because of that. But I believe that they've done phenomenally well in ensuring that those applications that are being dealt with are dealt with in a timely manner. The relationship, Patrick, between Gibraltar and the regulator is one where Gibraltar industry works very closely with the regulator. We pride ourselves that one of the main attractions for coming to Gibraltar is speed to market. And it's not just speed to market, but Patrick, in the area of DLT, it's speed to market in any other area of financial services. The regulator in the DLT space has streamlined the application to a level that allows them to take decisions as quickly as possible. So if I can just mention the application process to you, Patrick, if somebody approached us and said, we're interested in establishing a DLT or being licensed in Gibraltar as a DLT provider, the first thing I would say, and my team would say, is we will organize a meet and greet with the regulator. In other words, get you in front of the regulatory body in Gibraltar with a short presentation about who you are, what you do, what you propose to do in Gibraltar. In other jurisdictions, Patrick, when we say to them, we will get you in front of the regulator within 7 days, people don't believe us. People generally do not have that sort of experience with other regulators. And the reason for that is that Gibraltar is small, we're a small community, and our regulatory body, by definition, is also small. They are extremely proactive. So we can get people in front of the regulator very, very quickly. If the prospective client decides to go ahead, the process that we will embark upon is an initial application is submitted to the regulator for the prospective applicant as a DLT provider. The initial application contains very a high-level outline of what the firm seeks to do in Gibraltar, how it proposes to meet its regulatory or to satisfy the regulatory objectives in the jurisdiction. The regulator will then take that information back and will categorize the firm according to the risk that the firm poses in clearly applying the regulatory principles in Gibraltar. So you might be a regulatory category 1, 2, or 3 firm, and depending on which category you are, then it depends on what regulatory requirements, capital requirements apply to you as a firm. You're then invited to submit a full application, which is where the detail of the application is submitted to the regulator, and the process and the content is similar to what you would expect in any other jurisdiction. There are forms that need to be submitted in respect of the fitness and propriety of the shareholders. You will need to demonstrate that you satisfy all the regulatory principles that you have to comply with in the jurisdiction. There are very detailed policies that are also appended to the application. That clearly can take a number of months. But if you compare the length of time that it takes to license and obtain a license in Gibraltar compared to other jurisdictions, Gibraltar compares very favorably. We are told that it's extremely difficult to get even an initial meeting with other regulators in other jurisdictions, and in terms of licensing times, we are told that sometimes it could take well over 2 years to obtain a license. We would like to think that provided you spend sufficient management time to put a credible application together, it could take anything between 6 and 12 months. I think it can be done significantly quicker, provided that you ensure that you put the management time and support into the application process, and you answer the questions as quickly as you can in order to allow the regulator to move with their approval of the application.
Fantastic. I am here with Nigel Feetham, a man who was described by the Gibraltar media as a Renaissance man, and he's certainly a FinTech Renaissance man, as he's sitting here talking to us about all sorts of fascinating trends today. Hello, Sachin. It's great to see you, Sachin Bling, joining us this evening. Delighted to see you here along with everybody else. Feel free to ask a question or drop us a like if you can. Ladies and gentlemen, we are in the last almost 15 minutes of today's show. We've got a spectacular audience around the world who've been talking about blockchain, cryptocurrency, and all manner of other issues. Now, that's very heartening to hear altogether about the fact that you're saying how responsive the GFSC are, and obviously, given the regulatory constraints and the capacity constraints, which I totally understand is quite tricky. I suppose, does that feed back into what you were saying earlier? I mean, the ability for people to be able to employ freely in Gibraltar from La Linea and across the Spanish border, as well as in the Gibraltar Financial Centre itself?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, if you look at the Gibraltar workforce, Patrick, there are roughly around 14,000 frontier workers. That might not be an exact figure; it's an approximate figure. But in other words, there are 14,000 workers that commute to Gibraltar every day to work in the jurisdiction. The workforce in Gibraltar is double that amount. Again, these are rough figures, with a population of around 34,000 people. So there's an abundance of labor in Gibraltar. We would like to think that there is full employment in the jurisdiction, but there is also an abundance of labor across the border as well in Spain.
And roughly what's the size of that catchment area in terms of population within sort of 20, 30 kilometers of Gibraltar?
The population within the
roughly. Yeah.
I wouldn't be able to say hundreds of thousands. Hundreds of thousands is clearly clearly right, but I wouldn't be able to give you an
a vast multiple, in other words, of the population, the 34,000 people who are actually in Gibraltar, and the something like 3,600 you were saying that were working in insurance earlier on, and so on. And I mean, the insurance business has been an incredible success, hasn't it? Because actually, if I remember correctly, British insurance is now almost dominated by Gibraltar rather than vice versa.
Well, partly so, Patrick. Gibraltar insurance companies account for about, I think, 20% of the UK market. In other words, 1 in 5 insurance policies that are sold in the United Kingdom are underwritten by Gibraltar insurance companies. The number may be higher. I mean, I'm told, but there isn't an official figure for this, that number may be as high as 30%. And the reason why Gibraltar has been able to capture such a significant part of the UK motor market, and we're talking about motor specifically, is because the market is dominated by digital technology. In other words, 80% of the motor market in the UK is a digitalized market. It's insurance policies that are sold online. They are sold through aggregators, through price comparison websites in the United Kingdom. And if you've ever bought insurance for an aggregator, you sit in front of your computer or your tablet or your phone. You answer personal questions in relation to yourself as a prospective policyholder, and then you obtain a quote and you decide whether you buy the cheapest insurance, or if for whatever reason there is a brand that you want to buy, then you go ahead and you buy whatever brand you feel you would like to buy using the online capability. So the Gibraltar financial insurance sector is entirely digital. 95% of the market is UK focused. That 5% of business, and it's probably even less than 5%, is either international insurance business that is not UK focused, or legacy business that is sitting in Gibraltar because for whatever reason the insurance policies we were not able to undertake portfolio transfers, and therefore we were not able to portfolio transfer those policies from Gibraltar during the Brexit process into the European Union. I mean, I must have commenced over 15 portfolio transfer applications during the course of 4 years, and I completed very many of these transactions. Probably one of the very few lawyers, including the United Kingdom, to have done as much work as I have done in that particular area. Those companies that were undertaking European business that we didn't portfolio transfer, in other words, that we didn't transfer the insurance policies to another insurance company based in the European Union. What we did as well, Patrick, was redomicile a number of Gibraltar companies to Malta. Redomiciliation is the ability to be able to transfer the company lock, stock and barrel to another jurisdiction. It's legislation that I helped to draft in the early 90s in Gibraltar, and which has been used very successfully, and indeed that I used very successfully in order to move some businesses, insurance companies in particular, to Malta during the Brexit period. And indeed, I should also point out that I spent a great deal of my time in Malta during that period of time. And one of the things that I also did as well was to redomicile companies in Malta that were undertaking UK business, because of course, once the United Kingdom left the European Union, and indeed Gibraltar, in the same way as a Gibraltar or United Kingdom company wasn't able to continue to passport its services into the European Union, conversely, a financial services company in Malta wouldn't be able to passport its services into the United Kingdom. There is a transitional period. That transitional period hasn't expired, But what I also did, Patrick, was to redomicile a number of insurance companies from Malta to Gibraltar because of that ability in Gibraltar to be able to continue to have market access to the United Kingdom.
Fantastic stuff altogether. I'm here with the FinTech Renaissance man of Gibraltar, Nigel Feetham QC. We've got several questions coming up. Let me also say good evening to Anthony Clancy. Lovely to see you this evening. Good evening also to Marcus Ward, if I didn't say that earlier. No, I did say that earlier, didn't I, Marcus? I'm saying hello to you again. Simon Huckle, great to see you in the show. You've got a question. So say a big exchange like Binance wants to use Gibraltar licenses. How would Gibraltar ensure that all rules are followed? Would Gibraltar, for example, give authority to the CEO? Nigel, explain to us a little bit about how that sort of process might work for a hypothetical blockchain company exchange that comes to Gibraltar's shores.
Yes, let's keep the discussion entirely hypothetical rather than refer to any specific entity. Hypothetically speaking, any application on any applicant seeking to establish in Gibraltar has to comply with all the rules that we require exchanges to comply with. In other words, we will never make an exception for anyone. The rules apply to everyone in the same way as we have 15 licensees that are currently licensed that comply with the rules. The same rules would apply to anybody else seeking to apply in Gibraltar, whether they happen to be Binance or anybody else. I mean, the reality is that everyone is welcome to submit an application, and then it is a matter for the regulator to ensure that the application process is dealt with in a rigorous manner, ensuring that the licensees that are granted licenses at the end of the process are licenses that Gibraltar considers merit inclusion in the Gibraltar Club and in the Gibraltar financial services industry that is currently made up of very top operators. And I've mentioned Bitso, I've mentioned Huboy, I've mentioned Bullish, I've mentioned Sapo, and indeed there are many other good names in the Gibraltar market, and I have no doubt whatsoever that we will keep the standards at the highest level possible.
Fabulous altogether. Speaking of high standards possible, thank you very much, Robert Brown of clearingandsettlement.com. Great to see you as always, Robert. I hope you're having a good day wherever you are in the world. Now, and also thank you very much to Betley Invest. Good to see you, Betley. I don't have a question, but I just wanted to say thanks for the great content and discussion. Bravo, Messrs. Young and Feetham. So perhaps actually, Nigel, that brings us to an interesting hiatus in the discussion where you've discussed all about Malta, you've discussed all about Gibraltar, you've discussed all about the relations between the two, you've discussed very, very many topics in relation to the Gibraltar Financial Centre, the blockchain, so on and so forth. Where do you think on a general level the capital market revolution goes next?
I think, Patrick, that the revolution in Gibraltar will continue. In other words, we are just scratching the surface. I really firmly believe that in the digital space, Gibraltar is just scratching the surface, and not just Gibraltar, but I think everyone else. This is a revolution that will continue. If we compare this to the Renaissance, the Italian Renaissance, where the Renaissance period lasted for well over 100 years, and I have no doubt that this revolution will really revolutionize the sector and will continue for a very, very long time. A point that I have made in the past is that nobody is late to this party. We will, in Gibraltar, continue to see the space growing. We will also, I think, see operators coming to Gibraltar and bridging that gap between the traditional financial services sector and the digital asset and crypto market. Whoever achieves that, I think, will have a huge market share going forward. I believe that Gibraltar is very well placed to take advantage of that for all the reasons that I've said. And let me also point out, Patrick, that in Gibraltar, We have a very proactive government of Gibraltar, not just a proactive regulator, but a very proactive government that is led by a chief minister of Gibraltar that understands the financial services sector very well. He's also a QC, like I am. He's worked in this sector in the past for a number of years, and he's really attuned to the needs of business. Let me also say as well, Patrick, that we have a financial services minister that is totally committed to the sector. He's constantly working very closely both with the regulator and the industry to ensure the growth in the sector, the success of the sector. And Mr. Isola himself is also a very senior member of the legal profession. Clearly, he's not practicing law at the moment, but that experience that he has puts Gibraltar in a unique position, I think, in terms of our future. And the future is exciting and bright. And I'm extremely confident that Gibraltar will become a premier jurisdiction in the digital space, and that we will consolidate and grow as we have been doing for the last 20 years.
Well, on that note, ladies and gentlemen, Nigel Feetham, thank you very much. I noticed that the lights seem to be dimming a little bit, but I don't believe the lights are certainly going out in Gibraltar's incredible financial sector anytime now. It's only thanks to the wonders of ESG things that dimmer switches can manage to hit us on occasion. So, Nigel, it has been a phenomenal show this evening. I think Gibraltar is miles ahead in terms of your approach as a financial centre, as you yourself said, and that's thanks to the coherent regulatory approach that you have adopted. And indeed, the direction of crypto blockchain travel is regulation. And as one of the first jurisdictions to regulate the space of anything, others are learning from Gibraltar rather than learning us. That is Gibraltar learning from other jurisdictions. Thank you very much for the many great comments. Thank you, Craig Richardson. Thank you, Ian Miller. It's been absolutely a joy to present this show this evening. Many people have been commenting. Let me try and give a quick list of you. Ian Bonsor, Les Calvert, John T, thank you for your question. And Peter Secon, thank you for your questions as well as Ian. Marcus Ward, Simon Huckle, Anthony Clancy, Robert Brown, Betley Invest, and Craig Richardson. It's been fabulous to have you all together. Next show, we're going to be on the other side of the Atlantic, God willing. We're going to be dealing with the master of ICE futures. Yes, indeed, ladies and gentlemen, we've got Trabu Bland. He's coming to us on the 15th of March at 7 p.m. CET. Trabu is the man who runs all of the futures, options, derivatives exchanges in the remit of one of the world's leading exchanges, the Intercontinental Exchange Group. And they, as we all know, sit at the very top of Young's Pyramid, alongside the likes of the Hong Kong exchanges and Chicago Mercantile Exchange Group. It only remains for me to say once again, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for all of your support today. And indeed, wish you all a wonderful and very fabulously sensational International Women's Day. The good folks of One, they're going to be back tomorrow with their show at 6 o'clock, having enjoyed a fabulous evening toasting the wonderment of womanhood this evening in Valletta here in Malta. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Patrick L. Young, publisher of Exchange Invest. I think in some ways I might almost qualify as a little bit of a Renaissance man as well, but perhaps not as broadly as Nigel Feetham, certainly when it comes to the FinTech topic. This has been Exchange Invest IPO-VID number 57 with the FinTech Renaissance man, Nigel Feetham. We'll be back next week from the United States of America. Have a great week, ladies and gentlemen. Over and out.
Thank you, Patrick.